Hey there, greetings everybody. Want to welcome you here to Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I'm the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. So it's Friday night, ranking the albums. I'm 100% ready to go here. I've listened to all these albums. I actually listened to them all in one day, which is not something I normally do. I usually split them into twos. So I'll do two one night and then another two another night. On occasion, I've done one each night. But I've never actually listened to all four of them at once, but I was really behind on my baseball, so I figured I will spend whatever amount of time doing my baseball and have this albums going and making notes while I go, because I like to do two things at once. So anyways, the four albums that, first of all, before we get going, just so people know what it is we do here, this is actually episode 6. Basically, Ben, who's a subscriber of mine, friend of mine, gives me 4 albums. I listen to all 4, and then I kind of rank them according to how I like them. That's pretty much all there is to it. I don't make a ton of notes about them. I don't tell you all kinds of information about them and that. May tell you the year, may tell you, well, I'm going to tell you what the album is, obviously, and maybe I'll tell you the year and that stuff too. But generally speaking, I'm just talking about the four albums and ranking them. So today's 4 albums are Earth and Fire. That's the name of the band. The album is called Songs of the Marching Children from 1971. The next band is the Water Boys. Their album is This Is the Sea from 1985. The third album is Renaissance, a band fairly well known by most prog people on the YouTube community here. And this is called Prologue from 1972. Chris de Burge is the 4th artist, and his album is The Getaway from 1982. So I've listened to all 4. One album kind of turned out to be what I thought it would be. The other album, 2 of the albums kind of turned out to be kind of much what I thought they would be, and the other 2 were a bit surprising for me. One was completely surprising for me because I had never heard them before. So, anyways, how it ended up is we got a number 1 and a number 2 and a number 3 and a number 4. So the number 3 and 4 weren't really that close. Number 3 actually won fairly easily, but he was a distant third from the second and first one, which were pretty close. They were almost separated by very little, and I just decided, and the reason I chose the one band for number 1 was that I wanted to hear more of the album. I thought it was more intriguing to me. But I did like the second one quite a bit too. It was a little bit tough, that one. Okay, so we're going to start by the way I always do. I'll give you the rankings in reverse order. So I'll tell you who finished 4th, who finished 3rd, who finished 2nd, and you'll know who finished 1st because you'll know the other 3, right? So the number 4 band, and I'll probably talk a little bit about the albums as well. That's normally what we do. So the number 4 album for me came from Chris de Burge. This was The Getaway from 1982. I kind of had a feeling this album would be the last place unless something completely surprised me. I've never been a huge fan of his music. I don't dislike him. It's not a guy I would turn off if I heard him on the radio or anything. But he doesn't sing the style of music that really interests me. I find his music a little bit too love themed. There's a lot of love themes, a lot of soft rock in there. His voice is very poppy, almost how do you want to say it? Almost girlish like at times. But it actually has always kind of reminded me of Lawrence Gowan. I think his voice, their voices are very similar in style and sound. So I always sometimes if I hear them on the radio, I'll sometimes think it's one and it's actually the other one. It has happened to me before. So so that's one of the things about them. But it's also that overall, even though I've heard some of these tracks before and I don't mind them, I just find it's just a little bit too much of the love theme and too much of the soft rock, which are not things that I really care too much for. So I think that's probably the reason why he finished 4th. Although I do think he has a great voice. I think he's very good at the style of music he's in. He really good at putting music together. I can see why a lot of people like his stuff. Doesn't surprise me in the least. It's just not my style. So for today, he's going to finish 4th. Number 3 is going to be the Water Boys. This was a band I had not heard before. I have heard of them, but I didn't think I had heard anything from them. And I listened to this album, and I never heard anything on this album before. It's from 1985. This is The Sea. They surprised me a little bit here because his voice at times, and not all the times, but at times I found the male voice on this, it's got a little bit of a Dylan quality to a Bob Dylan quality. It doesn't really sound like Bob Dylan, but every time I would hear him sing, Dylan would pop into my head, and that's pretty much what I mean. So there's kind of a hint of that going on, I guess. It's very poppy. At times, there's almost a female sound to his voice. Not always. So he has a little bit of a range to his voice. So he can be a little bit more raspy. He can be a little bit more feminine in his voice. So he does have some good ranges to his stuff, which is kind of interesting. At parts in this album, there's some real rockin' stuff going on too, which surprised me because it's different. I was kind of thinking it would, because for some reason I did a little reading on these guys because I'd never heard of them, or I had heard of them, but I had never actually knew much about them. And it said that they had that kind of there's folky parts to their music. So I thought, okay, this might be interesting. But I didn't really hear any of that. I didn't feel like there was any folky part to the music at all. Maybe the use of the folky type instruments is what they're referring to, but I didn't hear it. So anyways, I thought it was a better album than the Krista Berg one, so I gave it a 3rd spot. The top 2 were a hair apart, and they both, of course, have some serious progressive elements to their music, which probably has strengthened their challenge for each other. So we'll go with the number 2 band first. This one just haired out, and like I said, I think it had haired out. It came second by a hair because the other band was more intriguing. I thought that going forward, I think I will like, if I give this album another chance, I think I'm going to like it a lot more. So that's part of the reason why it won. I thought it was really good. Of course, Renaissance is the number 2 band here. It might come as a surprise to some people. This is actually the 3rd Renaissance album that I've been given, or not been given, but I've used on the channel. I think this is the better of the 3 that I've had too. Lots of really strong stuff here. The bass on this album is absolutely killer. I didn't realize how great a bass player this guy was. He is absolutely killing it on this album. Fantastic stuff. The vocals are strong, both the female and the male vocals on this album, because of course Annie Haslam is this. I think this is her debut album with the band. I'm not 100% sure. I don't go back and research the albums too much unless there's a serious curiosity about it, but I'm pretty sure that's her voice on here. Sounds like her and everything. And she has a range that is like pretty much, there's maybe 2 or 3 musicians in rock that have the kind of musical range that she has, especially the high end. Yeah. So really good vocals here. The male vocals here, of course, are good too. Surprisingly, I hadn't actually thought much about the male vocals on this because I thought it was going to be just her, but there was some male vocals on here and they were really good. I really liked them. I also found that they had this one song, and I forgot to write down the name of the song. I think it's The Sound of the Sea. Really catchy song. And there's some animal sounds on this, which is kind of a prog specialty. Prog bands like to put those animal sounds. I thought it really added a huge element to the particular song. Really caught my attention, and I like this song quite a bit. There's lots of piano on here as well. The opening track was almost a jazzy feel to it, and although it wasn't bad, I was like worried that it was all going to be all jazz and I wasn't going to be able to listen to it much. And now I know that they do have a fair bit of jazz elements in their music. So I was just concerned that it might be too much, but it wasn't. It wasn't at all. It's a pretty solid album. Scored a fairly high number for me. But it was haired out by the winner of this particular day's contest, Earth and Fire. These are a band that I had heard of. Songs of the Marching Children. I've actually heard of the album before, but I hadn't actually listened to the band or the album before. Different sites that I've been watching, they talked about it, and I thought, oh, that's something I should make a note of and get into. And Ben, which I love, the thing about Ben is that he always picks stuff that you don't you know that you've heard and stuff like that, but he'll put it to you so that you got to kind of listen to it. So it's good for me. So this is a very strong, I think a pretty strong album. I think it started out a little bit, I wasn't quite sure at first. It's got some interesting harmonies. The vocals are actually one of the stronger parts of this album. The female vocalist and the male vocalist, they harmonize very well together. And that's not something you hear a lot. Usually, if you have male vocalists and they're brothers or they're related in some ways, their voices synchronize very well and you get really good harmony. There are some bands that aren't related that have that same kind of element. Not as much, but they still have it. But I can't think of offhand of a female and male combo that really give me that. This is the kind of one of the first times I've heard this kind of thing. And I just thought it was really interesting and really good. And I want to hear more of it. That's part of the reason why I chose it. They have a very psychedelic kind of feel to their music at times. There's a melodic, almost progressive part to their music as well, and there's lots of classical instrumentation on the album. They use things. I'm just trying to think of something. There's some acoustic guitar here. There's some. I think there is some either violin or woodwind instrumentation on this album, but it gives that kind of classical feel to it as well. But there is some surprisingly heavy stuff here. So the one song, which was called Lost Forever, this really surprised me. At this point, it was kind of late into the album, and I was really quite surprised how heavy the song was. It was really quite different from the first half dozen tracks, which were, progressive, psychedelic, poppy, almost tame, almost laid back, on a little bit of a pastoral feel to it. But then this song comes and it's really quite heavy. The guitar on it was quite heavy and riffing. This really woke me up actually to the album. So I think there's a lot of really interesting sounds on this album, and I'm just surprised that I had not heard anything by these guys before. So I decided to give them the win. They were pretty even with Renaissance. It was almost virtually a tie, and I think the thing that put them over the top was the surprising heaviness at times, and the psychedelic and the vocal parts, which I think are all interesting, and I just wanted to hear it again. And so it's going to win for that reason, but it still deserves to win anyways. So there you have it. Those are my rankings for today's Ranking the Albums. This is episode number 6, and I'll just give them to you one more time in order. So Earth and Fire, Songs of the Marching Children, wins it. Number 2 is Renaissance, Prologue. That is number 2. And then number 3 is the Waterboys. This is the C. And number 4, Burge, and the album The Getaway. It was fun to do today. I hope you liked this episode. Please like and subscribe. It's much appreciated. If you want to put the list according to how you see it in the comments below, you might have any comments about stuff on the albums as well, that's great. And don't forget to hit the notification bell, and we will be back next Friday with another ranking of the albums put to me by Ben. So take care and bye.